So here's a few news articles. There is a region of the sky, like 10 to 20% of the entire sky, where astronomers cannot see much because the Milky Way is in the way. We're on the edge of the Milky Way, and it has a big bulge in the center where there's a supermassive black hole, and so we have no way to see what's beyond there. Except now they have learned how to see parts of it by using unusual wavelengths of light that penetrate through all that dust and other matter, regions of infrared, and they've begun to map out what's behind there. And they've found a cluster of galaxies and some supermassive attractor that is holding them together. So they're beginning to penetrate that hidden area, which is an interesting matter for astronomers and cosmologists to see what's there in a large portion of the sky that has been completely unavailable to us. San Francisco had an AI art exhibit that consisted of art made by AIs. And the only thing the artist did, which by the way is not nothing, I tried it and I couldn't. You have to make a description of the scene, and then you have to refine the description and go through all the images until you get a good one. Some of them will tell you what description they used, others will regard that as a secret. And so the art critic here for SF Gate doesn't think much of it. But anyway, this is what a lot of people are saying. Much of the art you create with modern artificial intelligence is very good. As good as, to most people, it's as good as stuff that comes from real artists and a whole lot cheaper. So they say it'll put out of business a whole lot of artists that are making things like advertising things and logos. So this is an interesting fact, and I've certainly heard this in many different ways for years. The most valuable people at your company and the people you pay the most, at least on the tech side, are the programmers. Often get 300 grand or more because they develop the software that makes your product run. And if other people like security are peripherals on the side in a support role, and you don't pay them as much and you think you'll just outsource them, although security people make a good living, but developers are worth even more, and this guy says they're the most scarce commodity on the planet, saying the thing that's holding everything back is a lack of good developers. And it reminds me, last night one of the students asked me if I was doing malware analysis in my consulting. And I said, no, nobody wants that. What they want is for me to teach their developers secure coding. That seems to be a higher priority for the people I'm consulting with, and I think that fits the same thing here. I mean, you need your developers, and you need the developers to do better work, and that's right in the heartblood of your company. And other issues are small in comparison. So Musk is doing amazing things at Twitter. Everybody is very, very angry at him. It does sound insane. He told the investors that helped pay for his outrageous buyout, where he paid 4 times what Twitter was worth, that he was going to cut 75% of the staff to save money. Now that he's there, he says he's only going to cut 50% of the staff. But he told them they have 1 week to roll out a bunch of new features, and if they don't get them out, they're fired. And something leaked out that Jason Calacanis did. He's one of the guys on the All In podcast I listen to, one of the famous, and he's old Musk. A couple of the people from that podcast are billionaires, and they work with Musk. They worked with Musk at Tesla, and they're working with him at Twitter. And they said, all we have to do is force everyone to come into face-to-face work, because that'll make a bunch of them quit, and that'll help thin out the pack. They calculated, we don't make enough money to support this staff. If you fire 3/4 of the staff, that'll save enough money that will make a profit. So everybody's watching to see what he's going to do. He's very much like Donald Trump. He's wildly inconsistent, making outrageous claims. The people at Twitter have not received any official communication of anything. They don't know what their expectations are, what their goals are, whether they're going to be fired or anything. They only find out anything by reading Musk's tweets, just like everybody found out what Trump was doing just from his tweet storm. And he wildly erratically moves from one thing to another. He got in there promising to let Donald Trump on right away. Then when he got in, he said, no, I'm going to set up a board, and the board will consist of angry political activists from both sides, and I'll expect them to agree on things, which everyone says is ridiculous and it's not going to work. And then when individual celebrities complained, he intervened and put them on, and when AOC criticized him, her Twitter account is immediately frozen. So it does seem to be very much like Trump. There's no actual rules, there's no actual plan, there's just an angry tyrant at the top doing arbitrary things. And so we'll see what comes of that. The main thing, though, is he is going to have to pay $1 billion a year in interest, and Twitter's gross revenue has never even made it to $1 billion yet. It never made more than $700 million, and it never made any profit at all. That was more than eaten up by expenses. So he's obligated to pay that amount of interest on all the money he borrowed, and it is very unclear that there is any way to make that kind of money off of Twitter. And so, to that extent, I do understand drastic changes have to be made really fast if he's going to make that amount of money. So we will see.
So he's paying about 3% interest?
Apparently so, yes, even more, because he put in he had to borrow, I think, 15 or 20 billion dollars to get in there, and so yeah, it's not, more like 5 or 6%, I think. That's what they say. And there's also the opportunity cost, because he put in 20 or 25 billion of his own money from Tesla. However, to be fair, since Tesla trades at 10 times its actual valuation, the most important thing he can do to keep the Tesla stock up, just like Trump, is to make sure that he's in the headlines every day. By just doing anything outrageous, by tweeting anything outrageous, he has to be in the headlines every day to stay famous, to hold his stock up. His stock is not held up by earnings. And this is what Trump figured out, and this is what internet influencers figure out. You just have to be in the news every day. And then everybody will talk about you, and you'll be valued for that. So in a way, he might be doing the correct thing to just do something outrageous every day just to make sure that he's always in the news. So there's been a lot of talk for decades. I used to work in fields related to this, of brain-computer interfaces. This is another thing Musk promised, although he hasn't managed to get it working yet. You have some kind of chip implanted in your brain so you can connect directly to the internet from your brain. And the Semaphore company has made a version of this that is not very invasive. What they do is they put a small electrode in going through your jugular vein, so they don't have to drill through your skull or anything. And then they get an electrode placed in your brain that can only get a sort of vague amount of indication of what's going on in the brain. What it really can pick up is the motor cortex. So then, by activating your brain in a way that would tap your foot, it can detect that. So you can now slowly spell things out like one bit at a time by tapping your foot and then not tapping your foot, tapping your foot and then not tapping your foot. You can sort of binary tap things out. So people who are completely paralyzed can communicate very slowly, like they can spell out a word gradually, letter by letter, which is better than nothing. And this is, and the point of this is you can do a lot better if you actually do brain surgery and put a big grid of like electrodes on your skull, but that's very invasive. This is a relatively non-invasive technique, so it's another way to do it. There are a lot of people have been, for decades, trying to find some way to build an artificial brain-computer interface, both to help paralyzed people and hopefully to be an enhancement for people that are not paralyzed someday, although progress has not been as fast as anybody wanted. What would be nice is like in the science fiction movies where you just wear a helmet and it somehow is sensitive enough to get enough signal through your skull, but that is not very many people can make any progress at that. The problem is your skull blocks so much of the signal that what you get is a very vague signal and it's hard to make any sense of it. So this one is interesting. There's a clipboard hijacker. This has been around for a while. Malware on your machine hijacks your clipboard, so when you copy a Bitcoin address and try to paste it into another place to do a transaction, it replaces your Bitcoin address with another address, so they get the money. The problem is the address is completely different, of course, because Bitcoin addresses are random, so this one somehow has a reservoir of addresses, either on the server or generated locally, that is so large that they can actually make the first few characters and the last few characters correct. So if you do a simple test just checking that the first 3 or 4 characters are right, it will look the same. That's a new wrinkle. And that is not easy to do, considering that they're random. You would have to make 256 guesses just to make the first byte the same, and 256 squared or cubed in the 4th power to get the few bytes the same. So even getting just a few bytes correct would require a lot of pre-calculation. And somehow they're doing it fast enough that they can do that within 5 seconds. So that's an improvement. This is something Musk did at the opening of his Gigafactory, and then some Chinese shows have done this too. They get hundreds or thousands of drones to go up here, and they just project like a whole movie on the sky. And they're going to do it in New York City. They're going to have an advertisement for a video game, Candy Crush. They're going to have these drones having Candy Crush candy floating around in the sky. And some people, it's pretty impressive technology, and it looks pretty good. It's like a controlled fireworks display. A lot of people are complaining in New York City that this will just mean the night sky is gone and the whole world is turned into a billboard now, because people will probably just have ads in this fashion all the time, which is probably true. And so there may be some kind of regulation limiting how much of this you can do. I think right now there is none. Anyway, let me stop this one.